The Department of Education in KwaZulu-Natal has instructed schools in the province to send learners home early on the first day of the academic year yesterday. And of course, that was due to severe weather conditions that continue there. That decision comes after a level 5 warning of disruptive rains was issued by the SA Weather Service. As we know, KZN has been struggling with inclement weather since December last year, with over 50 people killed and many others left homeless. Search and rescue teams are still looking out for several missing people. The province infrastructure is also set to be severely damaged. So we're asking this morning, should KZN be declared a state of disaster? Let's bring in the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Thembi Nkadimeng. It's great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. And it does feel like this is a decision that should have been made quite some time ago, Minister. What are some of the considerations that need to come into play when making a decision like this?
Morning, Michelle, and morning to your listeners. Well, Michelle, there's a difference between a classification and a declaration of disaster. KZN has been classified, as you have said, the inclement weather started to show patterns. Year in 2023, and it was Tongat South Coast in its entirety was further reclassified. And on the 15th of January this year. You will recall that in the past year, it was mainly the Uthukela district in the areas of Ladysmith, and that classification was given. What does it mean? It allowed the province, the municipalities, the state-owned enterprises as well to classify or to reprioritize their budget and focus it on the disaster. And the classification of eThekwini has been given as well for them to be able to do that jointly with the province. We are in KZN with all the sector departments. We are receiving all the reports for the final conclusion of whether the damage is at the level of a declaration of a disaster, possibly in the two areas as we are focusing still to be going to possible, as weather services indicated, in the Watuguza area to reach around a classification of 7-8 at around tomorrow or Saturday. As you may know, it's an incremental pattern, but funds have been made available through the disaster center to municipalities to ensure that they begin with the work of repair.
Yeah. So, Minister, effectively you're saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, that parts of the province might fall under this state of disaster and not the province as a whole. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. That's our indication of the reports. The last report we had, we received it at 20 hours yesterday from the Provincial Disaster Management Center. Yes, the damages are huge. You will recall on the 8-9, there were heavy rains as well, including up to yesterday in the south coast of Durban. They are also showing signs, the areas of Paleto, Mhlanga, and Tongat areas, heavy rains, damage huge to infrastructure. So that area, which also had floods in 2022, the municipality and the province had almost been around the clock in turning the 2022 situation around, and they were hard hit again. So the classification and possibly a declaration will not necessarily be about KwaZulu-Natal in its entirety, but will be about specific areas. We're looking as well at Port St. John's in the Eastern Cape, which is also facing similar problems perpetually or repeatedly.
Right. So Minister, what would that mean in terms of, obviously it means a release of particular resources, right, that can be channeled into getting those areas back on their feet. And that will come with a whole range of issues insofar as oversight is concerned, right? We have these challenges time and time again of making sure that the money goes where it needs to go. So how do you see that process unfolding over the coming weeks and months?
Well, as I am saying, there are clear processes which the Act defines on key responsibilities, and they are retained by the sector departments. For example, human settlement will have to come in, provide temporary shelter right up to a permanent shelter, as and when the land is cleared or another alternative land gets to be provided. The municipality, on another hand, will have to provide the land and Department of Education may have to ask for an additional budget for the disaster. It's all coordinated by the National Disaster Management Center, but sector departments take the responsibility in terms of the receiving the allocation, sharing it with municipalities. Our responsibility gets to be at the coordination level, one, but two, to ensure that the reports, as the Act mandates, the sector departments to send them periodically to the Disaster Management Center for overseeing and overview. So we have a ministerial, interministerial disaster management committee, which sit, as I said, it last set yesterday at 8, whose responsibility, amongst others, is to oversee. One, from search and rescue, early warning, evacuation of people. In case that does not sufficiently work, there are fatalities and other injuries or loss of life or loss of property, then there are various sector departments. So the budgetary process, what we do, we coordinate and submit to National Treasury, and the budgetary processes of realignment of priorities were assisted by the Department of Finance, which is National Treasury, and ultimately it lends into that. And at the coordination level, we carry a responsibility of ensuring that if a school has been damaged and funds have been allocated to that, we promptly need to be able to respond.
Yeah, so that's from a process perspective, Minister. What can you tell the residents of those particular areas about the relief they can then expect in very practical terms? Those people who have had their homes washed away, they've lost all of their belongings in many cases, roads that have been washed away, people are stuck in their complexes because entire sections of roads have been washed away. Yeah. So in practical terms, Minister, you know, if I'm one of those people who is now living in a community shelter, what would that mean for me, for my family?
Well, it means that Michelle, we are on the ground, as I said. Defense is the Department of Public Works is starting the process of putting up bridges. We may want to supply the information in terms of the order of priorities in what they will be doing. As I said, the interministerial received the almost final conclusive report yesterday at 8 in the evening from the Provincial Disaster Management Center, which places the damage so far at about 2.2 billion. And that includes various schools, roads, and whatever. The SAPS team is still continuing with the search and rescue. Social development is assisting with the burials who are busy on site, and human settlement and municipalities with the relocation and temporary units. In some instances, already material has been given to in line with the human settlement policy to ensure that who are ready to build or rebuild for themselves, they could be able to do that. But temporary shelter has also been organized by municipalities to ensure that people are accommodated temporarily while human settlement is doing that. So we are working around the clock to ensure that we bring back life to normality. At 5 p.m. I'll be in a Tegwini municipality with the mayor beginning to roll out the programs for around Mhlanga roads that have been damaged at Tongat and all the areas. Tomorrow I'm in Watuguza in the morning with the Deputy President to ensure that we roll out all that to bring back life of normality to our people. We are there. We are here to give hope.
And it sounds, Minister, I mean, obviously these are not issues that can be fixed overnight, right? This is real infrastructure damage. It's a long-term process, even though I can imagine that if you're in that situation where you've had your life turned so completely upside down that you want a solution and you want one now. But it's not a case of being able to rehome people by tomorrow, for example.
Yes. And that is why I said we've activated. For example, in Nambichi, there are still people who are in halls. Home affairs have been activated for their paperwork. Social development but we have already moved because these were November, December floods with identification of land from a municipal point of view, and human settlement is on site already. Contractors have been appointed to deal with the settlement. But as you indicate as you start what was the damage of November, December, and then it hit again, and it brings a halt, and you restart again, and it's incremental. It includes other areas afresh. So the report we're receiving, for example, is not the same as the December report. Additional areas are beginning to receive more rain as well. We haven't spoken about Gauteng, for example, and you know the damage that happened last week. I know today the forecast is on. I'm just saying the country is alert. All our systems and processes are alert. We're working across the clock to ensure that we're on top of these disasters and their management. Eastern Cape, the same. We have had strong winds in the Western Cape, which led to damages as well. They are having, for example, in the Drakensberg area, a wasp increase, and the farmers are attacked there. It's actually at the level of disaster as well. But yeah, we are there.
Yeah, it also, compounds the issues that have been experienced in KwaZulu-Natal as we focus on that province. The riots, the flooding that dates back to 2021 as well. So long-standing infrastructure challenges in that particular province. But you're right, Minister, there are several challenges in other provinces as well. Thembi Nkadimeng, let me thank you for your time this morning. The Minister of COCTA joining us here on the AM Report this morning as we continue to unpack what kind of relief will now be available to those impacted by the rainfall, flooding and disasters in KwaZulu-Natal.